Welcome to Freedom to Learn, the podcast that champions choice in education, defends parental rights, and exposes the harm caused by school unions. I'm Jenny Gentles, Director of Education Freedom and Parental Rights at DFI, the Defense of Freedom Institute in Washington, D.C. Within hours of Tennessee's Education Freedom Scholarship Program application opening in May, over 33,000 applications were submitted for 20,000 available spots. During a special legislative session earlier this year, Tennessee expanded eligibility for the state's Education Savings Account, or ESA program, which previously had been limited by income and geography. For the upcoming school year, half of the available scholarships are universally available. The other half are reserved for families under a certain income threshold. Families can use the scholarships for tuition and fees at registered Tennessee private schools, and any leftover funds can be used for additional educational expenses. Tennessee's Education Commissioner Lizzette Reynolds joins me today to talk about the state's Education Freedom Program, as well as Tennessee's literacy initiatives, teacher training, investing in post-COVID academic recovery, and expanding career pathways. Before coming to Tennessee, Commissioner Reynolds previously served as Vice President of Policy for Excel and Ed. She was Chief Deputy Commissioner at the Texas Education Agency, and she held various roles at the U.S. Department of Education. Stick around to hear what actions Commissioner Reynolds hopes to see from the federal government. Commissioner Reynolds, welcome to Freedom to Learn.
Thank you. It's nice to see you again.
It's good to see you too. I've been following your work from afar, and I'm really excited to talk with you today. You've been working in education policy for nearly 3 decades at the state and federal level, and as an education reform advocate, and that's how I know you. What inspired you to work in this field?
I was inspired just growing up. We grew up in lower middle class, as my mom liked to say. But we lived paycheck to paycheck. There was not a lot of financial stability or security. And so for my parents, it was really important that all their kids, figured out what they could do after high school. And that meant doing really well in education. So that they were always my inspiration. And then, of course, I went to college. I met people that I never would have otherwise encountered if I hadn't gone to my little small liberal arts college. And so it just created endless opportunities for me. And then, going into the Capitol, when I got my promotion with my state senator, Teal Bivens out of Amarillo, when he promoted me legislative director, that meant I got to serve with him on the Senate Education Committee. And that was also the year that then Governor, now President George W. Bush became governor and placed education at the top of his agenda. So I was just surrounded with education policy, and then ended up working for him. And again, another inspiration, George W. Bush and Margaret Spellings, who ensured that we continue to focus on the education of all our students in Texas, challenging the status quo, whatever that is. And so that's been kind of the path that I have embarked upon over the years. When I did work for the federal government, I was blessed to be able to work on the IDEA reauthorization.
Oh.
And that was really important because we also knew that all our students with disabilities weren't being served well. And there needed to be a level of accountability that our states and districts needed to have in order to ensure that they all had futures as well. Because every student should flourish in our country. That's what makes our country so great, are the opportunities that are afforded to all of our students. And so that means that we have to create that foundation and that framework of achievement and education for all. So it continues to be, part of me because I also have children, and they have also received, the best education possible. And that included also 4 years in private school for my oldest student, for my oldest child, who was having some issues. We weren't receiving the sort of supports that we thought we needed, but we were blessed because we were able to utilize our credit history to be able to get a loan and send our students, send Luke to private school. So there's just so many things that happen, whether you're you're on that education path, learning the policies that make student learning so valuable for every child, from being a parent and wanting the only the best for your student. And that's what we're facing today, is parents that want only the best for their kids.
I think so many people have this misconception that there are either public school parents or private school parents. And it sounds like your story is similar to mine. My children have moved between public and private schools. I don't identify as a public school parent or a private school parent. I am a parent who wants the best educational option, the best choice, the best fit for my children. And I think that's how most parents are.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're in Tennessee now, the Commissioner of Education in Tennessee. Tell us about the Tennessee environment. How's it different from Texas, from the other states that you have worked in your advocacy role?
I think what really makes Tennessee so incredibly significant is it really starts with the legacy of Lamar Alexander and the focus that he placed on education throughout his career. And then all the governors after him, with starting with Governor Bredesen, and then Governor Haslam, and now Governor Lee, and how they made education a key pillar of their administrations. And it's been a steady progress. There hasn't been. We've got to, we've got to chase the silver bullet, and we've got to make sure that everything's in place right here, right now, to ensure that whatever that silver bullet is going to ensure that all our students are ready for their futures. It was slow and steady progress, and there's been everything from ensuring that there are pathways after a student leaves high school, to accountability and assessment, to high quality teaching and high quality instructional materials, and the education policies that follow the science of learning, that ensure that kids actually know how to read, how to do math, how to engage in our humanities and our sciences. And then coming to this administration, which made an incredible investment in public education, with adding over $2.5 billion to the state budget for public education, ensuring that our starting teachers have an increasing minimum salary, which will get to $50,000 in 2026. And then, of course, opening the doors to universal school choice, which passed this past legislative session in a special session, to provide access to families all across the state to choices. And it doesn't mean that every parent is going to take advantage of this, because we have a really good system here. We have public schools that are focused on achievement, that are ensuring that their kids have everything they need in order to be successful. But sometimes the fit isn't always there, and parents need access so that their children can also have whatever it is that they need in order to see them flourish after high school. So it is an environment that continues to make steady progress. We've had an incredible bounce back after the pandemic academically, and I believe in that academic foundation, as do all parents. And that is really the piece that I think sometimes we miss, and that we're not missing here in Tennessee. That achievement does matter, that students need to know the basics. They need to know how to read. They need to know how to do math. They need to know how to write, because then that allows them to delve deeper into the humanities, into the sciences, into being a contributing member to society. So, we're bringing all these things together so that our whole state can benefit from their learning and from their futures.
Well, I hear you saying that something very remarkable in that list of achievements that's happened so far in Tennessee, and that is that your students have bounced back, that learning loss that we saw nationwide during school closures, during the pandemic policies that were so disruptive, that you've seen recovery, and that is unique to Tennessee. So kudos to all that put policies in place that made that happen. And it didn't just happen, right? There was significant intention and investment in summer school, in tutoring, in ensuring that that learning loss was addressed. And then when you're talking about literacy and improvement there's and priority there was a law passed, I think, several years ago that made major investments and set intentions when it comes to literacy. Where are you now with top priorities? I mean, so much has happened in Tennessee, and then you're responsible for implementing so much that happened before you arrived. How are you prioritizing, and like, what would you say your highest priorities are for improving
I
student
mean,
outcomes?
when I think about what our priorities are doing what parents expect of the system, right? They expect all our kids to learn the basics,
Hmm.
to learn those foundational, to gain that foundational academic knowledge so that they can be flourishing adults later on in the years, whatever that is. It's also elevating choices and their voices so that they feel empowered to be able to decide where it is that their children are going to be served the best, whether it is in their traditional public school, a charter school, a private school, homeschool, and then maybe in the future in micro schools, right? So, really thinking about providing an accessible environment so that parents can decide what is going to be the best learning environment for their students. And then where we're really focused on is ensuring we have flexible pathways after high school. You know, we have an incredible higher education infrastructure here in the state of Tennessee. That is another very unique factor. I believe, as I look across the states. Um, our General Assembly, our governor, our communities, our leadership are very focused on ensuring that our kids have flexible options in the higher education system, whether it is a 2-year pathway, a technical college pathway, or a 4-year pathway. And so it's really our job to be able to get our kids ready so that they can decide what that's going to be. And it could be just going straight into the workforce, taking advantage of the economic investments that have been made in our state, in our student population, so that they can go into the workplace ready to work because they've already learned. So those are the three things that I have a year and a half left under Governor Lee. And so really it's about establishing that foundation and that framework so the next administration can take it to the next level, just as every governor has taken it to that next level over the years.
Well, that first thing, making sure that schools are doing what parents expect them to do, that would be teaching their child to read, right? So Tennessee's literacy initiatives, the resulting test scores, I'm sure are reassuring to you, to legislative leaders in Tennessee, and then also to parents. Can we talk about that a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
how are you seeing these state literacy policies roll out and make it into the classroom and have an impact?
Well, I think what's so important is you can create policy, you can pass laws, but at the end of the day, it's about the implementation.
Mhm.
And it's about taking the implementation seriously. And we're seeing that in this state. We are seeing these directors of schools that are focused on ensuring that their teachers have the materials, the professional development, and the support in order to ensure that their kids can read by grade 3. Of course, where we can't stop at grade 3 though, right? And we do have students that during the pandemic who, while we stayed open for the most part, there were still some gaps in their learning in those early years. And these kids are in middle school now. So really it is about continuing that implementation, continuing those policies into those later years. So those kids that miss those fundamentals are able to gain them in the areas where they lack, and then to build upon their actual foundational learning so that they are now um, reading to learn, and are able to advance so that they can read on grade level, particularly when they get into high school. Because I think there's a lot of misconception that if you just learn the basics, you're going to be successful throughout your educational careers. It's a continuous model of improvement and a continuous trajectory of learning so that you can be at the level that you need to be when you go into the workforce. The technical manuals of today's manufacturing processes is is very rigorous. You can't just live on your base, you know, your foundational literacy practices. So we have to continue to advance that, and I feel that the leaders of education, regardless of the learning environment, are focused on that to ensure that their kids continue to learn throughout their journeys, so that they're ready for whatever comes to them after high school.
Great that school leaders are embracing, and I assume district leaders are embracing these policies. How are they reaching the teachers? I know many of us listened to Emily Hanford's very powerful, very heartbreaking and infuriating podcast series, Sold a Story. And a lot of teachers were infuriated when they realized that they had been taught to teach to read incorrectly. So, how is Tennessee ensuring that teachers are trained up properly in the ways of literacy instruction?
Well, it was a huge focal point of my predecessor, Dr. Schwinn. And so, and as a former teacher and a school leader, she was able to really focus our agency on ensuring that those resources and materials and supports were there for the teachers.
Good.
Um, again, we were kind of in that more online environment with, after the pandemic. So there were tons of resources that were provided online. But what also was established was a literacy network. So we have a number of folks that work in and around the regions that support school districts to ensure that they have the supports they need to be able to implement high quality instructional materials. Because again, you can have all the high quality materials you want, but if teachers don't know how to utilize them or build strategies around them, then they're worthless. So it really, again, was about establishing that foundation and then reaching out to our school leaders, reaching out to our teachers, and ensuring that they had what they needed, and helping them fill in the gaps. Now, as a state, we're not there to teach, we're not there to instruct, but we're there to ensure that they have the things that they need so that they can further what that learning is. We've also worked very closely with our institutions of higher education to ensure that what they're teaching around the science of reading is also applicable to the strategies we know that works. We still have a lot more to do. I mean, I think our educator preparation programs are doing what they need to do in reading, but I think there are other opportunities when we start thinking about the other elements of learning that our students deserve.
Absolutely. Sometimes when I talk to state leaders, they make it sound so easy. We got this policy through and now we're implementing it, but it's not always easy. So I wondered if you would be open to addressing some of the common tactics that are used to block education reform at the state level, and maybe advise parents, members on how they can counter that influence in their states. And to be frank, and maybe this is not as much of an issue in Tennessee, teachers unions, teacher associations, a lot of times are there blocking reforms that will help their members, will help teachers, and certainly will benefit students.
I think for me that what comes to mind, it's maybe not the answer that I should be providing, but it's this deficit perspective that we have that sometimes comes out in the education community, that if you're poor or you come from a marginalized community or you have a certain you come from a certain background, that somehow you can't learn like every other, like your more affluent counterparts or your counterparts from more affluent communities. And so that becomes an excuse sometimes for why would you hold me accountable? These kids are poor. They're from Appalachia. They, XYZ. This is what's wrong with them. So you can't hold us accountable for the circumstances that we can't control. Just feel like foundationally that's being utilized to block reform, and why you can't do what you can do.
Mhm.
I mean, that said, you know, there's still it's that belief in kids, and I believe deeply in kids, and I hear sometimes, oh no, I do believe in kids. It's just, well, maybe this subject, isn't what they really are interested in. And I'm like, how do you know if you take it away from them? And sometimes I feel that sometimes I hear people want to eliminate as opposed to provide flexibilities. Because at the end of the day, we need to allow kids to be able to engage in all subject areas at the most rigorous levels that they can attain. Because then that's not going to block their pathway into what they want to do after high school. Um, as far as, I mean, obviously, I think one of the biggest controversial education policies is school choice, right?
Mhm.
And it is unfortunate because, in that same vein, as advocates for, you know, poor kids and kids that don't, that come from communities that maybe don't have as much affluence, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to provide the parents of those students additional opportunities that would give them that leverage to be successful. Um, it's so weird. I mean, it's funny to me is that, you never really hear about education policy too much on the election side of the house. But once it becomes a state policy, that's when people start getting down and dirty about what's good and what's bad. And at the end of the day, it is about opportunity, and it is about choices for all families. And to get in front of that and to oppose that is sometimes it's kind of a head scratcher to me.
Well, you certainly have high demand for choice, for education freedom in Tennessee. The state expanded the Education Freedom Scholarship Program earlier this year, and the application numbers were through the roof.
Yeah.
Can you provide any sense of like who those applicants were, kind of what happens next with the program?
We had such great state partner engagement, ensuring that families can actually, apply um, y- with all the information they needed so that they could get their students in. It was first come, first serve. That was the way the law passed. So it was this huge influx. Um,
With prioritization for some student groups, right?
well, no, not in the first year. In the first year, it was first come, first serve, but we did have two different pots. So you had 10,000 that was considered universal, and then 10,000 seats that were income eligible based.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to report that we will have 10,000 in each bucket. And the prioritization comes next year, particularly because of the overwhelming response. We will have an additional 5,000 seats open up, and then prioritization will occur for that second year. Then the third year, then it becomes universal again on a first come, first serve. But that is where I was really happy, or really pleased to see the state partner engagement, because for me, I really wanted to see our families that that maybe needed the support, the additional support in order to serve their children. We at the agency got this amazing email from a parent who had 7 children, and yeah, I don't want to get all emotional, but they were so happy. They talked about how their kids cheered, and the mom cried, and the dad did a little jig. I mean, it was transformational for them. And so that's the focus that this needs to be. We've also had overwhelming response from our private school community, who are open to serving these students in their communities. And then again, in many cases, um, it is part of them serving their community, particularly when it comes to our income-based families.
Yeah, I think I read that there were close to 200 private schools across the state who had sign notices of intent to participate?
I think we're even over that, I think. I don't
Okay, that was
I haven't
before
seen the latest and greatest. I
the
know,
applications started rolling in.
yeah,
So
we're in the week of now we're getting the statistics put together, so that we can start, now that we're closing, kind of shutting things down. But we still want to make sure we get everything right. The implementation piece, as you know, is always the big scary part, because part of the implementation relies on technology, and you need the technology to work. And again, our partner was very successful in supporting this effort.
great. Yeah, technology and then just ability to reach and connect and communicate
Yeah.
with parents. I know when I was running the school choice office in Florida 20 years ago at this point, I made sure that we translated the information into Spanish and Haitian Creole,
That's right.
which is a big population in South Florida. I would love to ask you as we wrap up about the relationship between the state and the federal government. This is a big topic in DC, where I'm based, where a lot of listeners are based. And I'm wondering if you have any federal actions that you'd like to see, any federal burdens that you would like for Tennessee to be released from when it comes to education policy.
you know, Again, I would like to see the strings detached. Again, I believe that states know best for their school districts. I think, and we're all unique in the way that we operate and the way we serve our students and our families. So, we hear about, block grants. We hear about different things and different opportunities, but we haven't really, I think they're still kind of working through all that, obviously, as they go through the confirmation process. But, I'd love to see, you know, us get the dollars that we send up there come back to our communities, and think through some of the issues that kind of that kind of tie our hands in our back to our back, and not allow us to really fully support what needs to happen down in the local level. So, um, you know, I feel like we're still in this kind of wait and see. But I'm very hopeful and I'm excited about the opportunities that can be afforded to us through really giving and devolving education back to the states.
Great. Well, Commissioner Reynolds, thank you for your commitment to education freedom and to empowering parents. And thank you for joining Freedom to Learn.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Freedom to Learn is a production of the Defense of Freedom Institute. You can learn more about DFI at dfipolicy.org. If you have feedback or suggestions for future podcasts, please reach out to us at podcast@dfipolicy.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.